There are very few times that I felt unsafe in my community. I have had the privilege of growing up in Dublin, New Hampshire, a small town where everyone knows everyone and neighbors are like chosen family. If I was stranded at school when I was little and my parents couldn't come and pick me up, someone from down the street would be able to come and get me. If I was short a few ingredients while making a meal, I could walk across the street and someone would have some to spare. My community was filled with people who cared about me. Living in New Hampshire, a predominantly white place, in a town of about 1,500 people, I only knew about 10 to 15 people of color, one of which is my friend. Her name is Mary. I asked her about how she felt living in our community, and her answer shocked me. Not only did she feel unsupported, but she felt unsafe, tired. She deals with racism daily at her school, whether it is microaggressions or people casually throwing around the N-word. When she has brought this to the faculty, the first thing they ask is, does this really happen? That doesn't sound like so-and-so. There's nothing we can really do. There's nothing we can really do. That is the response that's given to her from the people who are supposed to be her support system. This cracked my perception of who my community was. How could a place that I recall with such fondness, a place where I felt free and supported enough to grow, be such a place of fear, of wariness, of hopelessness to someone else? How could someone that I have lived 5 minutes away from for my entire life have experiences that are worlds different than my own? In 2020, responding to the blatant police brutality displayed in this country, our local community center started hosting weekly peaceful vigils. Every Saturday from 1 to 2, we would stand in the center of town with posters of the names of those who had been murdered at the hands of our corrupt system. This was meant to be both a wake-up call to our community, as well as a reminder to never forget those names, a reminder that racism still very much exists in our country, and it is killing people no different from our neighbors. Before this, there had been very few conversations centered around the topic of racism in our town. No place taking a stance on the topic or its effects on our community. Following the vigils, our community center formally put out an anti-racism statement, standing in support of the Black Lives Matter movement and ensuring that the people of color in our community knew that they were supported. It basically acknowledged that systematic racism is present in our community because it is ingrained in the fundamental systems in which our country was created. That now it is necessary to ensure that everyone feels safe, especially the people of color in our community, and that they pledge to start taking initiative to start those complex conversations on how we are racist. This bursted the bubble of silence in our community. People were angry, saying that Dublin doesn't need to change because there is no racism in our town, and that this statement was divisive, meaning to create unnecessary tension in our community. Following this divide, some tried to take down the funding for the community center entirely. The Dublin Community Center lives up to its name. It is a place where people can check in on each other over coffee and cookies. It is a place where kids can learn new things and feel safe. It is a place where free meals are handed out to those who don't know when they're going to get to eat again. Taking away the community center would be stripping huge pillars of support, of curiosity, of communication, and of friendship in our community. My mother started receiving hate mail because of her position on the community center board and her part in writing the statement. This is something that I never imagined could happen in Dublin. I couldn't grasp the idea that people who I had known and trusted for my entire life were able to foster enough hatred to write a letter of such caliber. Going into public felt different. I had lost a little bit of that trust, a little bit of that feeling of security that I had felt my whole life, the confidence of knowing that I knew who my neighbors were. My mother's friend, Grace, another person of color in our community, was scared to leave her house, knowing that the people who greet her so warmly in public were the same people who believe that their security, their comfort, their well-being is more important than hers. I felt stuck. My community had held me up while simultaneously shattering my perception of who they were and how their support could be conditional. I came to realize two things. My community is racist, but my community is filled with people who have the capacity to change. Fear is what it all boils down to. That moment of being thrown into something unknown, something unbearably uncomfortable, where all you want to do is shut the door on the dreaded feeling in the pit of your stomach. I feel that in the pit of my stomach standing here today in front of all of you. I cannot tell you the amount of times I dreamed of being back home, oblivious to the fear that I have, and that I am sharing a speech that I finished writing at 1 a.m. There is no escaping that fear, and you have to sit in that discomfort. Being called racist is scary. It feels like being reprimanded by a teacher or scolded by your mother. It catches you off guard and makes you vulnerable. That knee-jerk reaction to shut the door before it gets the chance to sink in and push back with anger, deflect until the problem disappears. I have been racist, and I do, unintentionally or not, perpetuate racism. It is nearly impossible to notice a problem when it is the foundation of what surrounds you. My community was built on the principles of racism because it is ingrained in the foundation of this country. My town was built to support white people and to fit everyone else in later. It was built to support me. My community has had generations and generations of practice on how to make me feel supported. But where does that leave everyone else? Where does that leave Grace? Where does that leave Mary? They have had to find a way to live in a system not built for them. And I cannot imagine the weight of that struggle. I cannot erase the feelings of fear, the feeling of unsafeness they have felt. That is something that they will always have to carry, but that doesn't mean that I can't change. At FFI, we are taught that failure is a chance to learn. My town has failed the people of color in our community, and that is not something that we can keep repeating. We can change our mistakes. We can create a community that supports everyone. Being racist does not mean that you are a bad person. The people of my community who are racist also have the capacity to help their neighbors down the street get home from school, to give the person next door an extra cup of flour. They have the capacity to care. The people of color in my community need help, and there is nothing but fear getting in the way. I believe that my community is capable of change, and that we have the ability to rebuild a Dublin that fits everyone. Thank you.